That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, impressive win against Wisconsin. I mean, 38-14 final score. Obviously, late touchdown or pretty late touchdown to make it look more respectable, 38-7 prior to that. Defense only gave up one touchdown because one of those touchdowns was a kick return. And, so overall, offense did some really good things. Also had some struggles in some areas. We'll be talking about that. But then the defense also played pretty well too. So before we start diving into all the, go offense, defense, do all that, some general takeaways that you had from this game.
I really felt going in that this would be a good look at where Alabama really is, because it's been sort of a Jekyll and Hyde season so far. The terrible performance in Tallahassee, the really impressive performance against totally outmanned Louisiana Monroe. I thought this would be against sort of to be honest, an average Power 4 team. I thought this would be like a good look at exactly what Alabama is right now. And there were more goods than bads, which should have been the expectation. You were favored to win by around 20, and they won by 24. I thought there was a lot more good than bad in terms of the takeaways. Explosive plays from the wide receiver group. Ty Simpson, very efficient and a playmaker, not just a game manager, a playmaker. We saw that from that group. A defense that only gave up 7 points in 60 minutes to a Power 4 football team. So there's a lot more positives, sure, but also some negatives. And I think the question for Alabama, Clint, is can these negatives, can these bad parts to what we saw yesterday, can that be fixed? Or is this who they are and they have to coach around that against a very demanding schedule? We're here to talk about Wisconsin and not future games, but I hope everybody realizes that there are now 9 games left. 7 are against opponents ranked today. 7. One of them's Eastern Illinois. They're not going to be ranked. The other one, the only unranked SEC team they're playing, is South Carolina. And I don't think what you saw yesterday from South Carolina is typical of what you'll see from them most of the season.
Yeah, they probably took Vanderbilt not seriously enough, which Alabama can relate to. And they ended up catching one. Vanderbilt's a good football team. But, I agree with you. There are some concerns when it comes to what we saw on Saturday. The inability to consistently generate movement off the line of scrimmage. You got Caden Proctor, a 360-plus pound offensive tackle. You've got, Cam Dewberry, a 330-plus pound, left guard. You got, some other guys, obviously Parker Brailsford's undersized for a center. I would say Wilkin Formby, he's added some mass from a height weight standpoint, 324 pounds. That's pretty good size, but he's still not this really powerful people moving offensive lineman. But then you've got Geno Vandermark, who is very technically sound, but I do think he lacks power a little bit and the ability to create that consistent movement. Thought Jaden Roberts did some good things as far as that's concerned on Saturday, but just for whatever reason, that first drive against Florida State in the season opener, it was a thing of beauty. They were getting consistent push. I wouldn't say consistent. It was pretty inconsistent, but you saw a pretty, a consistent enough push over the course of that drive where you felt good about the offensive line and kind of being able to bully people. Really, since then, we haven't seen it nearly to the degree that we were expecting or hoping. And, maybe Jaden Roberts continuing to get healthy, maybe getting him back into the starting lineup at right guard, maybe that would help. Michael Carroll, when he was in, I thought he performed pretty well, and he did move some people and create some holes. And so as that competition continues, that he could be another potential solution to that problem. Maybe getting Jam Miller back, and the fact that he brings that explosive element that is similar to a Kevin Riley, but, I think he brings more of a power element as well, where you can kind of do both. You can get to the second level quickly, but you can also, when you have to kind of create for yourself, you can do that a little bit more than maybe Kevin Riley can as far as being able to run through people. Maybe that will help. But what I will say is, number one, I said this yesterday, the fact that the passing game remained so effective, or has in 2 of the 3 games, despite the fact that you don't have a complimentary run game, I think that's really impressive. I don't know how much more dynamic and dangerous it can get where people are putting so much focus on that it's really creating opportunities in the box and being able to run the football. But I do think that is something that Alabama, hopefully it's not something that they just have to work around all year. I mean, and granted, that is a possibility, but I'm hoping that as they get more comfortable operating in this offense and what it's going to require, how things are going to look different, maybe the fact that these teams are looking at what Ty Simpson's doing right now and they're like, all these weapons in the passing game, maybe that will present more opportunities and they can actually start to capitalize. But from what I was seeing, it was guys just inability to sustain blocks. I think there's some schematical issues that they need to work on as far as leaving certain guys unblocked. But, I overall, I mean, it's still, I know we're starting a very, it was a great victory for Alabama. We're starting with the negatives, but I kind of think that's important to kind of go ahead and address some of these issues, and then maybe we can get to some of the good stuff.
Well, you're definitely going to have a situation where you need to be ready to play Georgia. They're going to watch these 3 games very, very carefully. They're going to see what Florida State did. They're going to watch even the Monroe game, and they're going to watch Wisconsin, and they're going to know Alabama really well, and played Alabama a year ago. So, obviously those negatives, that's something that's going to show itself in the next game in terms of Georgia's going to try to take advantage of what Alabama's not doing well. And I do think offensively, football is a real complicated sport. It really is. If you don't believe it, try to explain it to someone who knows nothing about it. Football's a complicated sport. But to break it down in its easiest components, you move the football forward by land or by air. And then on the other side of the ball, you defend the ball being moved against you by land or air. So that's 4 things, right? Running the ball, throwing the ball, defending the run, defending the pass when it comes to offense and defense. And of those 4 major building blocks, I think running the football on offense is possibly the biggest issue facing this team. They just have, again, the leading rusher Saturday was Ty Simpson. The running back that started the game, Kevin Riley, averaged 2.9 yards a carry. This is against Wisconsin, who's probably better than people think on defense. That's a legitimate Power 4 defense with some good players and good coaches like Luke Fickell.
Good at stopping the run, for sure.
Absolutely. Luke Fickell's a defensive guy. They should be good at that. And they are. So it wasn't like you did that against Monroe or Louisiana Lafayette, like, Missouri ran for 1 billion yards yesterday against them. But running the ball seems to be the biggest issue. On the other hand, what does this Alabama team do best? In terms of what we've seen them do well, throw the football. They're really outstanding. I don't think any quarterback in the United States has had a better 2 weeks than Ty Simpson. And I know some people listening to this are shouting, "You only played Monroe and Wisconsin." I get that. I'm just saying in the last 2 weeks, statistically.
Okay. What about Arch Manning against UTEP?
Exactly. And if it was easy to do against, bad competition, then more kids would do it. These numbers aren't normal even against that level of competition. Ty something like 41 to 45 or something in the last 2 weeks, which is ridiculous. Then factor in Ryan had a drop. Latsier Brooks had a drop. So Ty's numbers should have been even better than they were. But it is kind of curious to me that, like I said, these 4 building blocks, Clint, the 4 main building blocks of offensive and defensive football. If I was going to say what Alabama does worse, I'd say run the football. If I say what Alabama does best, it's throw the football. And I'm putting the defense in the middle. I think defending the pass is something they do second best, and defending the run third. But boy, this team can really advance the ball through the air with Ty Simpson throwing to a deep group of playmaking wide receivers.
That's kind of my biggest issue for the run game. Like when you think about Richard Young and you think about Daniel Hill and kind of what it is that they do well, they should be able to be powerful enough where they can create some on their own, even when it's not necessarily there. But it's unfair to ask them to do that consistently because, otherwise everybody would just have a massive running back and you would get your yardage regardless if your offensive line blocked or not. So that's not all there is to it. But it does feel like with the way that the offensive line is blocking, having more explosiveness and being able to take advantage of creases that aren't always there, being able to attack. I think Richard Young and and Daniel Hill. They're more between the tackles styles of player. I think attacking the perimeter a little bit more. I think you're seeing some of that. And obviously they're right now, I mean, it's good that you got a guy like Jeremy Bernard because you can really get him involved in the run game a little bit to add another wrinkle or element that, opposing defenses have to be considering or, game planning for or whatever. And I really like that versatility that he provides. But, I really do hope that Jam Miller, because, when we asked about the run game to Ryan Grubb, and I've said this 50,000 times, but I'll reiterate it because I think it's important. The first two words out of his mouth was Jam Miller. And, I think that the only way you reach that point where you're willing to leave that pause and make it, for dramatic effect, making a statement just by using two words, he was probably leaps and bounds more consistent and better than the other guys. So I'm hoping, because you got to think, is this offense really any different than what we were expecting from Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb? Yes, you expected a more consistent run game, but as far as, it's it feels like a throw first offense. Not saying that's exactly how it operates, even though I do think Ryan Grubb, at times, he does get a little bit pass happy. He's always done that. It's almost like he's looking for any reason to get pass happy. So don't give him one. Actually do your job when, you're running the football or trying to run the football. But, that this is something that as the guys get more comfortable and as some of these guys start getting more healthy and getting back on the field, I'm hoping that can alleviate some of these issues, because if it can, in Alabama, you got to think, Washington's offense from a numbers standpoint under Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, it was they had 1,000-yard rusher, but he was pretty much a workhorse running back. So if you would have divided those carries or opportunities amongst multiple guys, they wouldn't have had 1,000-yard rusher. So, it's not meant to, we're going to run for 200 yards every week, and that's going to be really consistent. But when you do run the football, it's got to be efficient. It's got to be effective. Right now, it is anything but. I do think that there are some things, and I've already brought up some of those, that I think can help as the season progresses. But that is something that, from a fan's perspective, and Wisconsin does have a really good run defense. I think that's one of the keys to their entire team. They can lean on being able to stop the run. I guess time will tell as they play better competition other than Alabama, but I don't think necessarily that was a reflection. But they couldn't get any sort of consistent push against Louisiana Monroe. Definitely didn't after that first drive against Florida State. So this has been a 3-game, 25% quarter of the season that is now passed, and you've been having these issues in all 3 games. So that's why I say it doesn't really matter what it looked like against Wisconsin necessarily. You can take that and say, well, they've got a problem doing some of these things. But I'm hoping that, as the passing game becomes way more dynamic and diverse, and defensive coordinators are like, how are we going to stop Ron Williams and Jeremy Bernard and Lysair Brooks and Isaiah Horton, and they're sprinkling in Josh Cuevas. You got Kevin Riley out of the backfield. You got Jam Miller when he comes back out of the backfield. Like, I'm hoping that will start to open up some opportunities, make it a little bit easier on the offensive line, and they can have more success on the ground. Because if they can do that, this offense has a chance to be very, very special.
And Jam Miller, like you said, I hope when you exactly as you say, when the defensive coordinators were playing start, like, okay, we've got to figure out the Bama pass game, and they sort of allow the run game a little more room to breathe. And now it's Jam Miller running the ball. I hope that's a fix, because these are some scary thoughts and some scary numbers here. Last year against Georgia, you rushed for 175 yards. Who out there listening to the show has any confidence that Alabama's going to rush for 175 against Georgia? When you didn't come close to doing that against Wisconsin, who thinks they can rush for 175? Now, like something like 117 of that came from the quarterback. So what you're really talking about so far in terms of something you lack on offense, Alabama is not making up for the productivity that you got from Jalen Milroe's legs a year ago. Nothing's making that up. Now, Ty's throwing it. I think that's making up some of it. Is you're more efficient in the air, you're more productive in the air. But gosh, being productive on the ground is such a game changer. And my concern is, unless that's addressed, that lost productivity in the ground game, it's going to show up in the loss column at some point, somewhere along the line, playing a schedule like Alabama's playing. You're going to have more successful running the ball. Maybe it's Jam Miller. There's every reason to think it might be. I would even say I've been impressed by AK Deer, and I do think that maybe him getting longer looks might be an idea. But to that, I say, hey, if you're going to keep being pass happy, you cannot put a running back in the game that can't protect the quarterback. You absolutely can't do that, because if Ty gets really racked, that could be a game-changing situation. Look what happened to South Carolina yesterday, you know, when Lenore Sellers went out. So you've got to run the ball better, but you've got to have a back that can protect the quarterback. Richard Young, I think, is fairly good at that, but then he got blown up real bad on at least one play yesterday against Wisconsin as a good example of what I'm talking about in terms of the backs just got to get that guy blocked. But there's also some positives, and it starts with those wide receivers. You went over them, Clint. They're all, you know, Isaiah Horton's coming up big. You know, I didn't really use Rico Scott much or as much, but I think we all know he's a dude. Cole Adams proves on these punt returns how good of a football player he is. I think we even know Jalen Hale, who we haven't really seen much of. Pretty good football player. Jalen Mbakwe, as athletic as anybody on the team. Such an impressive group depth-wise that I don't know that shows itself, because why on earth would you use that depth when you can just throw the ball to Ryan or throw the ball to Jerm? I'm not so sure that those two aren't the most explosive wide receiver. That isn't the most explosive wide receiver duo in the country. Got to address the drops. And I know a lot of people are making a big deal of it, and I get that, and perhaps they should. Just point out that he's 18 years old. Julio Jones had issues with drops as a freshman and sophomore at Alabama, and probably dropped more balls than Ryan has in terms of the amount of targets. It is something that can be fixed. Clearly, the kid's got talented hands. It's just a concentration issue and something that he's just got to work on. That's why they're here in college. These are college football players, not pro football players. They're developing their games. Ryan needs to make some strides in terms of consistently catching the football. But Ryan and Jerm, dude, I don't know anybody's got two better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. Like when you think about just the strain that they're going to put on opposing defenses from a game planning standpoint, and just, you know, Jerm is mostly playing the Z, but as far as just the different ways that you can use that Z, he's also lining up in the backfield. Like they are moving him around. And now that, you know, exactly what we had hoped to see, once we saw Lassier Brooks kind of be as good as he was against Louisiana Monroe, and we just know that this guy is a bona fide playmaker in his own right. And the fact that he kind of fits into that slot mold, which a lot of fans want Ryan Williams out of the slot, so naturally that fits. It's like a lot of people were saying, hey, it needs to be Lassier Brooks as a starter, and you need to send Ryan Williams to the bench. And granted, that was a small percentage, and, you know, that I hope they now understand, you know, that was way too premature. I understand he added another drop, but I mean, he was absolutely dynamic. He is a headache. I'm telling you, you were just waiting for this guy to break any game wide open. And so you'll live with those drops, you know, and there could be some that come in critical moments, like CeeDee Lamb. I remember in the opener for the Cowboys against the Eagles, I mean, he had a lot of production, but there were some key drops in there. So even the superstars of the NFL, you know, some of those guys have the same issue at times. And it's like, but when you think about what they can do and what we were hoping to see once we saw Lassier Brooks, it's like, okay, you know, as you mentioned last week, the trio of Ron Williams at the X, Jeremy Bernard at the Z, and Lassier Brooks in the slot. And then, you know, obviously they're going to move Ryan around. You can send Brooks, your wide receiver, 4 to the bench, bring Isaiah Horton onto the field, or I guess Horton would now be considered the wide receiver 4, but 3 or 4 really doesn't matter. And then you move Ryan to the slot and you put Horton at the X. It's like that is very simple. It makes sense. It allows Ryan Williams to get moved around, and he'll get those slot snaps, but it will also be able to continue to make plays on the perimeter, which he did a lot last season. And you've also got a guy like Rico Scott who can play in the slot, can be a backup for Jeremy Bernard when he needs it, can technically play the X if you want him to. So it's like, I really like that top 5. And I just think that you got a good combination of, you have that size element, which still, in my opinion, has not really been used. You know, a lot of Isaiah Horton's, you know, catches or success, you haven't seen a whole lot going up and getting it, contested catches. He's got some of that in him. But, you know, you have that size length element with him, but then you've got the separators, the dynamic players after the catch, a wide variety of them that's very ride-out-esque. Not saying to that extent, but I'm saying you just got a bunch of game breakers at any moment, and you as a quarterback, you can throw a slant and that thing could be housed and your job looks really easy. I mean, you just got 70 yards passing put on your stat sheet and a touchdown, and all you did was throw a slant where it needed to be thrown. And based off of how Ty Simpson has been throwing the football, he is more than capable of doing all of that. And that's something else that I want to touch on is just how phenomenal he has been the last 2 weeks. I understand it was Louisiana Monroe. I understand from a pass defense perspective, Wisconsin is probably not great. But you also got to understand that Wisconsin had Alabama in a situation where they were pretty much one-dimensional. You know, they were having zero success running the football. Normally that would put strain on a quarterback when you don't have that complementary run game. And it was not a big deal. And some of that is scheme and just how things are dialed up. But some of that is just Ty having a great understanding of where he wants to go with the football, where he's probably going to go with the football, but then also the confirmation, the seeing it. He can work through his progressions. I saw that on multiple occasions when the offensive line does allow pressure, which is absolutely happening. He has the ability to escape, and he's been, he'll take off and run with it. He'll also pull up and throw the football and make some crazy throws that way. He is just playing a level of football right now. Am I saying he's going to go into Athens, Georgia and do this against, the Bulldogs? Absolutely not. But I am saying, and I said this yesterday, when you have a guy, as far as going into the bye week, wanting to set your quarterback up, your young, and I say young from an experience standpoint, quarterback up to have confidence. After that Florida State game and a rocky performance from everybody, Alabama could not have done a better job of setting Ty Simpson up than they have the last couple of weeks, because he is oozing with confidence right now.
I think everybody's seeing why I was so excited about Ty this summer is for what everybody's seen the last 2 weeks. And no, I'm not talking about I expected that level of production or that level of efficiency, but in terms of his makeup, here's a kid who has all the makeup of a great game manager. And I hate that term. We'll do a whole show next summer about why I hate the term game manager. But I hate that term, but I'm going to use it here because it's just the best way to describe it. Ty has all the makeup of a great game manager. Why? Coach's son, grew up around football, grew up in a film room, loves the film. He's a gym rat. And again, coach's son, quarterback's son, that almost screams game manager. He knows the sport. He knows offense. He knows the position. But that's not why he was a 5-star, and that's not why I think he was a great prospect this whole time. It's because we're seeing Ty Simpson, the playmaker. He's got a lot of arm talent. He's not just the guy that makes a safe throw and keeps you out of trouble. He can throw it downfield. He can fit it to a tight window. He can throw the deep out. He can throw while he's rolling out. He can throw from the pocket. He can step up in the pocket. Even better, he can tuck it and run. He made a great play with his legs late in the game yesterday where he was just running to the sidelines, saw a DB. He could juke. He used a little dead leg move, got the guy on the ground, got around him, made another 10 yards. Ty's very athletic. He is a playmaker level athleticism, both the legs and the arms. That's why I love what Ty could become possibly, the combination of a kid that knows how to manage the game from the quarterback position, who also is a very gifted playmaker with legs and with arm. That makes him really difficult to defend. Now, as Clint said, couldn't agree more. He's got to do it against a good defense. You're not going to get to the NFL beating up on Monroe and Wisconsin. You got to get to the NFL beating up on the Georgias and the Florida States. I wouldn't say pass the first test. I think we're finding out that first test was a little unfair. Thankfully, when I went to law school, they didn't give you the final on day one. They let you study the whole semester before you took the final. Ty sort of had to take a final on day one of being a starting quarterback, in this league against that level of competition. But he didn't pass. He was a C- or a D+ maybe, that first game. He's going to have to do it against Georgia, I think, to get real believers. But the what I would call the clay has always been there, and it's been there in spades.
Yeah, and I mean, a good example of what you're talking about as far as needing to do it against a good defense. And I agree. I think that he was up and down against Florida State. I would probably grade him C. C type of grade, because I do think, given everything that was going wrong around him, some of that stuff I don't think you can put on him. But at the same time, needing to do it in a hostile environment, needing to do it against a better defense. And I think, you look at what Georgia and in Tennessee yesterday. Tennessee scored 41 points. Quarterback throws for close to 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, did have 2 interceptions. Got to make sure that you manage that. And Tennessee was also at home, so that you didn't have the hostile Athens environment that Ty Simpson's going to face. So that is also very different. But like, you look at Arch and what he did last year as a guy that everybody was extremely impressed with, beating up on inferior opponents. And then everybody expected him in the opening week of the season to go into Columbus against a very good defense in a very hostile environment. And granted, he didn't look much better. He didn't look better against UTEP. So it's not like it was just because it was Ohio State, but you also don't know how much. I don't know if he's 100% healthy, not going to speculate, but how much did that first game really affect his psyche? That's something that, Ty Simpson getting this confidence like he has, and kind of things being figured out. You would like defense travels and being able to run the football would be very beneficial in Athens. The fact that you were kind of going in and you don't have a consistent run game, that is concerning for Ty, because you're pretty much going in and saying, if we continue to have the same problems that we have all season, we're going to have to put this entire game on Ty's shoulder in a very hostile environment. That I don't like that setup. And we'll talk more about that as Georgia gets closer. But I will say that Ty is handling a lot of that extremely well. And he's managing a very, very efficient, very diverse passing attack that is really putting strain on defenses. So, you'd like to see him get a little bit more help as far as the run game. But, this Georgia defense, from what I've seen, it is not what we've seen from Georgia defensively. Like, Alabama can go there and have success, but, they're going to have to make sure that they're prepared, because Kirby Smart, from a revenge factor, I understand everybody's like, hey, the fact that they beat Tennessee, they came back, got fortunate. If they would have been coming off a loss, that would have been that much more motivated or motivation for Kirby Smart. It's going to be in Athens. It is going to be a top 15 opponent. The Alabama chip on Georgia's shoulder, the fact that they can't ever seem to get past Georgia, or it's extremely rare. These are things that and what happened last year, the motivation's going to already be there. So I don't think that really would have made much of a difference. But Alabama has the ability, with the way that they're playing right now, if they can do a better job of managing a hostile environment, which we still have not seen much under Kalen DeBoer. If they can get that corrected, I do think they can have success against Georgia.
Tennessee showed that you can score against Georgia. Tennessee put up a lot of points. That was in their own stadium. But Tennessee proved that there are points to be had against Georgia. Now, here's the thing. Alabama hasn't run the ball as well as Tennessee runs it. So Tennessee had some balance that I think helped them a lot in the game. But I do think I'll be surprised. And again, we'll get a lot of shows to talk about Georgia, and I can't wait to do it all, because it's sort of a Super Bowl feel to this game in a way, especially with Alabama coming in already with a loss and Georgia coming into it wanting to get this Alabama, monkey off their shoulder. But I think that Tennessee proved, hey, there's points to be had there. I'm confident Alabama can score. They can score some. I think they'll even score enough to win the game. It's the other side of the ball gets me a little nervous in terms of what you're asking them to do. You're not asking them to shut out Georgia. No one's going to do that. You're not asking them to hold them to 14. But I think for Alabama to be comfortable about winning this game, you got to hold them to, I think, a max of about 24. I'm uncomfortable expecting Alabama, with the run game as we see it so far, to score well over 24 against Georgia. But I think they could get to 27, 28, just throwing the ball and sprinkling in some success with Jam Miller on the ground. So you're asking the defense 24 or less against Georgia in their place, an emotional, fired up, charged up Georgia. It's going to be a heck of a game. I do think Alabama's got a real chance, as you point out, Clint, because Tennessee proved there's points to be had against Georgia. But I don't know that Alabama's offense is quite as dynamic as Tennessee's is, because so far they've been better running the ball. They had quite a bit of success, or some success on the ground against Georgia, making some good plays with their backs. Alabama's going to have to do that to really rack up points. But it really kind of leads me to where the Alabama's defense is. really good against Monroe, shutout, can't get any better than that. You hold Wisconsin to 7, but for some reason the unit still makes me a little nervous when you're asking them to deliver on a big stage against a big-time opponent.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And it is a concern. Like, I will say I feel better about their ability to generate pressure because of what they did on Saturday. I mean, obviously going the first 2 games and not having any sacks. I thought LT Overton did a much better job of finishing, and he was very disruptive. Yanze Pierre played a heck of a game, handful of pressures, had himself a sack, definitely showed that juice and that explosiveness off the edge. Quay Russaw turning the corner. Thought he did some good things as far as, the run game and stopping the run. And London Simmons just being way more active than I had seen him. I mean, and really, kind of one of the things that I thought is like, this guy's going to be steady. He's going to do his job consistently. And I thought that his ability to do that even at a young age is why he was getting onto the field or starting to work his way into the rotation, even before the injuries to Tim Keenan and Jeremiah Beeman. But I thought what was holding him back as far as being only a 3-star recruit was the ability to have the athleticism to move laterally and do some of those things, and having this penetrative, disruptive style. It's like I just thought that maybe that was probably a reason as far as the traits that you look for. Well, from what I saw against Wisconsin, I mean, it's there. I mean, he had a couple of pressures, probably should have had 2 sacks, but definitely had 1. And I thought he did some good things against the run. And so, you get hopefully Tim Keenan back. Maybe you can have a little bit more as far as, between the tackles and being able to stop the run. But London Simmons, if he can move into that second nose role and rotate in, I think he's going to provide really, really good snaps. And I thought Isaiah Faga, he did some good things and kind of showed some of the quickness that is what made him a desirable player coming out of high school. And he's still a little bit undersized. Georgia's definitely going to try to run the football. It's Georgia, but I think Alabama, from a pressuring Gunnar Stockton, he's kind of Ty Simpson in a way where there's was he like a dynamic runner? No, but he's very elusive. He understands when to run, and he puts strain on you that way. So a lot of what Georgia's going to be dealing with Ty Simpson's legs, Gunnar Stockton is going to be doing probably to Alabama's defense. But the problem is Gunnar Stockton's playing at home, so he doesn't have all of the the crowd noise and disruption and stuff, going on like Ty will. As far as the offensive line, I think we can probably both agree for Alabama that, there are still some issues in pass protection. There's some breakdowns. You're fortunate that you don't have, like, Mac Jones was really good as far as manipulating the pocket and eluding pressure in the pocket. He wasn't going to be a guy who escaped a ton and made a lot of plays outside of the pocket or on the move necessarily. A guy like Ty, he brings more of that. But you're pretty fortunate that, he does have that mobility or escapability where he can kind of bail out the offensive line or the running back in certain situations when they don't keep him adequately protected. The run blocking has just not been there. I mean, we've already talked about that. But how are you feeling about like Jaden Roberts and Michael Carroll in particular? Because those are 2 guys that I brought up at the beginning. Do you feel like they could potentially be solutions to some of these issues, or at least help? It's just a matter of, will that happen against Georgia? I don't know. But 2 kind of, right tackle, you're seeing a platoon, and then you're also seeing a platoon at guard. And really it's a 3-man rotation because, there were times where Jaden Roberts was coming in at right guard, and then Gino Vandermark was sliding over to left guard for Cam Dewberry. So you might continue to see or start to see this 3-man rotation that we were expecting going into the season. But how do you feel about those 2 guys in particular?
Well, there's question marks. I do like the fact that when you don't have a dominant presence, that you have a bit of a platoon or a bit of a rotation situation, because Parker Brailsford at center, he's Alabama's best offensive lineman, and in my opinion, he's Alabama's best offensive lineman by a good ways. And I think Caden Proctor is probably the second best lineman you have, though it gets a little leaky at times. He can leak in pass protection at times, but he is good at moving people in the run game, or better than anyone other than maybe Brailsford. But other than those 2, I'm not super comfortable with any of them, to be honest. In terms of a guy I'd want to sit out there for 65 snaps against Georgia. I think Michael Carroll can become that guy as the season progresses. He can become that. I think Georgia's going to be a lot for a true freshman right tackle. That's a big ask. So Wilkins going to have to play better and play quite a bit. And I think the interior guys certainly have the age and maturity and veteran nature about them, both Vandermark and Dewberry. They haven't been great. They've been okay. I think the offensive line is getting a little over criticized, but have they been great? Definitely not. Parker Brailsford's been great. Nothing else has been great. And they're going to have to be, especially if you're turning into a pass happy offense that's going to throw it, 40 plus times a game. You can't have Ty Simpson constantly under pressure. And you've got to create a run game somehow. I do think the offensive line is the key to Alabama's offense from going to be from very good moving to great. The key is the offensive line. It's not like Ty's going to get much better than we saw against Monroe and Wisconsin. And the wide receivers are great. They're not going to get much better. They're very, very good. Ty's very good. What can get better? The offensive line and the run game, and particularly offensive line. I like Clint, how you're, saying that, hey, we thought we might see a rotation at guard. I like the rotation if you're not getting dominant play from one player. Maybe Jaden Roberts can handle a lot more snaps than he's shown he can handle over last year and this year due to the concussion, due to injuries. I do think Roberts could be a solution, as you said. I do think Michael Carroll can be a solution as he gains experience. I think Athens is going to be too quick to expect him to play at an SEC winning level in that environment against that competition. I do think Alabama's got interesting people in place that can improve this position. And it's fair to ask questions about the offensive line because they haven't been great even against questionable competition at times. But pieces are there. It's just got to be coached well. And sometimes when you're not great, Clint, the great coaches can coach around it. One last point I'll make quickly. One of the things an offense likes to do is put its best 11 players on the field, when it really matters. I want my best 11 guys out there. One problem you have when the best unit on your team is wide receiver and the deepest position's wide receiver, that means if you're putting your best 11 on the field, at least 3, if not 4 of those guys are wide receivers. That means that you usually have just one tight end out there at all. And it's easier to run the ball from 12 personnel as opposed to 11 personnel. And I do think that's one issue affecting the run game and the offensive line, because the offensive line can get some help, especially if they got 2 tight ends out there, like guys like, let's say, Caleb Edwards and Jay Lindsey, who are real physical dudes. They could really help the run game. But is anybody listening to the show, do y'all like when they put Jay Lindsey out there and take Jeremy Bernard off? I mean, who likes that trade? I mean, so I do think that having such great wide receivers is a bit of a double-edged sword. Great for the playmaking, maybe not so great for the physicality for that reason. And this offensive line needs as much help as they can get.
Yeah, and we saw some 12 personnel. They opened in 12 personnel yesterday. Caleb Edwards actually got the start, and I think he's going to be a heck of a player. And we were really hyping him up. He was generating a lot of buzz coming into the season. He's still working through some things. This is big boy blocking, and while he is holding up for a true freshman probably about as good as you could ask, there are times as far as those isolation blocks where he's just simply getting beat. Josh Cuevas. There's one in particular that I'm thinking of where he just got flat out beat, and his guy was able to stack and shed and make the tackle. And so it's like a lot of these runs that are going for minimal gain, the offensive line is playing a part of that. I think scheme is playing a part of it, but the tight end blocking on the perimeter, it has not been where it needs to be. And this is why you talk Danny Lewis out of the transfer portal. This was supposed to be your Y tight end, your inline blocking guy, with Cuevas being more of your pass catcher. And Lewis is yet another guy who has not been available, and I don't know if he'll be available in 2 weeks against Georgia, maybe, hopefully. But even if he is, I think it's a lower body injury. And so you don't even know if he'll be 100%. He might be available, but that's something that I think as he gets healthy at some point this season, maybe that helps. Caleb Edwards continuing to get better each and every week. That should continue to help. So there are some of these things where it's like what they are right now. I don't necessarily think from a run game perspective they're going to be, for the entire season. I think they'll, for a variety of reasons, they'll start to get things figured out, at least to an extent. Not saying they're going to become a great rushing offense. Not saying that, but I do think that you can get better than what you've been getting, and you can maybe complement what you're producing in the passing game a little bit more. But you make a great point as far as, how this team how they're, yeah, I mean, if you got this many receivers, you really got 4 or 5 guys that you're like, they all deserve snaps and all deserve, the opportunities. I mean, at whose expense? You got to take a tight end off. You can't be maybe as physical. I mean, Josh Cuevas, when you only are going one tight end and he's not overly physical, it's like you lose something a little bit there. So, that's going to be something to definitely monitor, because I do think that not being able to run the football, especially like if you can establish a lead, let's say you go to Athens in a couple of weeks and you get up 2 touchdowns in the second half. It's like you would love to be able to lean on that run game at times and kind of drain some clock. And instead, more than likely, you're going to have to continue to have Ty throw the football a lot. And then you got to start doing a lot of safe, quick passes as an extension of your run game. But then the opposing defense will pick up on that very quickly. In fact, I will say that they will probably anticipate it, and then they can end up jumping some of those routes or whatever, and then you don't know what can happen. So, like, these are issues that need to be resolved, and I just wanted to make sure that we were addressing the issues and not making this all, rainbows and sunshine, because I've been guilty of that in the past. But what I will say is just, defensively, offensively, love what they have done against Wisconsin. Love what they've done the last 2 weeks. The energy that they're playing with, it has been phenomenal. And I just hope that while it has, what I'm hoping is that they use these as examples. Hey, we've gone about things the right way the last 2 weeks, and look at what's happened. We have kicked the mess out of both the opponents that we've played, because we are a really good football team. And when we take this seriously and we perform, or from an effort standpoint, how we were expected to and want to, good things happen. I'm hoping that is the lesson that guys continue to learn, because you are going to, I mean, if they go to Athens and they somehow beat Georgia, the praise after the way things have started is going to get out of hand. Even if they stay competitive, it's gonna, people are going to say, hey, yeah, they lost to a really good Georgia team, but just what they've done the last 3 weeks, maybe they should have won, whatever. But we only got a few more minutes here. Speaking of the defense, Bray Hubbard, and I, once again, said this yesterday, but want your thoughts on it. We criticized when he deserved to be criticized. We now need to praise when he is deserving of praise, because, man, I'm going to tell you, that guy's playing with his hair on fire. He is getting downhill. He's flying, across the entire width of the field when he needs to get in on a tackle. He had a couple of interceptions. And I think in 9 career starts, he's had 5 interceptions. That's really impressive. So, I really wanted to highlight Bray Hubbard and kind of give him credit, because he has made substantial improvement and is playing like the player we were all expecting going into the 2025 season before a rough performance against Florida State.
There's no way for me to know exactly what every defender in the country did yesterday, but I've got no problem saying the way Bray played, Bray deserves National Player of the Week. Now, some other kid who'd had some unbelievable game I'm just not aware of may win that and not Bray. I'm just saying Bray Hubbard played well enough Saturday to be awarded some sort of national defensive player, not just SEC defensive player of the week, but national defensive player of the week. That's how good he was. And as bad as he struggled against Florida State, and there were some effort issues, and he's been called out, to say the least, for those effort issues. I think in part because wouldn't that be like the last kid you would think would play with effort issues? And I think people were just so surprised or shocked to say, hey, it was Bray that just seemed to be, playing at 50% speed out there. Well, he asked Wisconsin. He played at 100% speed on Saturday, every snap. It wasn't just the interceptions, as Clint said. It was monster hits. He laid some Badgers out. I mean, and if I had to say, okay, you got 11 defenders, you've only given up 7 defensive points in 8 quarters, you must be full of dudes. I'm not so sure Alabama is. But if they have a dude, it's Bray Hubbard. He is a presence out there. And it's so impressive considering he's not one of the 5-star Saban freaks. He's not one of the 5 stars that Courtney Morgan has gone out and landed in the boat. Bray was, in essence, a 3-star effort kid, making the transition from quarterback to playing defense. And he's such a good kid. He's so easy to root for. How he took ownership for his lackadaisical play against Florida State is unlike most of the things you see in college football. And that's why ultimately Bray is going to be a great leader in this sport. And Alabama's lucky to have him. He's a dude. And if there's someone I will bet on will make plays in Athens against that level of competition, it's Bray Hubbard.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, and this is what you would hope for. And what's the most encouraging about pretty much all of this is the wide receiver room, what we were expecting. They've looked like it the last 2 weeks. Ty Simpson, based off of this offense and his fit in this offense, he has looked like the Ty Simpson we were expecting. Bray Hubbard looks how we were expecting Bray Hubbard to look. And that's something that, like, the offensive line so far, it has fallen short of expectations once again, which is extremely frustrating. But I don't think it's all on the offensive line, and I do think there's still a chance to right that ship. The run game, you lose Jam Miller. I definitely probably overhyped, the other guys in that room, and kind of they wouldn't skip a beat. They'd be just fine, and I was completely wrong about that. So it has fallen it's definitely fallen short of expectations, even though it was kind of one of the last things you would mention with the offense. Like, you thought it was a good stable of running backs and definitely thought they could be productive, but you weren't expecting it to be anything like the wide receivers or anything like that. But, and at least what we saw against Wisconsin, as far as the sacks and the pressures, wide variety of guys all making an impact, and they were disruptive. And granted, that quarterback O'Neal for Wisconsin, he made some plays as far as extending and stuff and using his legs to create issues for Alabama. But I thought overall they were hunting, really at all three levels. And I think Deontay Lawson, I think it's beneficial for him. Like, each and every week that he gets further away from that devastating knee injury last year, the better he looks. And I think now that he has lost the weight after being 239 pounds last year down to 228 now, I think him losing about 10 pounds, the movement is starting to return, which was pre-2024 Deontay Lawson. And the instincts are there. And granted, am I saying he's 100%? No, but he just looks better as far as the movement each and every week. I thought Nakai Hill-Green played a great game on Saturday. I mean, I really do. I think now granted, he's more of a thumper. I don't think he's going to make a lot of plays as far as in coverage and things like that. But just I noticed several plays against the run where he was defeating blocks and bringing down ball carriers. And he was, there was a couple of times where he had to kind of work his way across the field, gave 110% effort, and was arriving with authority. And you just never know when you do that and you're willing to make that kind of effort. You never know when you're going to pop a ball out. And now it's offense ball, and you end up helping your team win the game. So just love that energy for him. I think he's getting more comfortable and confident playing in this system. But just really, and Justin Jefferson, I think obviously he's got a lot of ability. The size is going to hurt him at times, but like what they're doing pretty much at all three levels, the fact that you're getting, hopefully getting Tim Keenan back, I really think that's going to help as far as your defensive line. Did we ever get an update on LT Overton, by the way?
I have not, and I've been asked that very recently. We haven't heard yet on LT. I didn't believe it to be serious. He didn't look like it was a serious injury to me, but it is concerning that he went into the locker room and wasn't just on the sidelines with his helmet. He went into the locker room. So I think we'll probably find something from Monday in the coach's availability press conference. I think that'll be something we're waiting to hear from DeBoer on Monday is the status of LT Overton. You don't want to go to Athens without that guy.
Yeah, and that's I was just looking through, the everything Kalen DeBoer said just to see because obviously I was doing the post-game show, but I'm surprised that question wasn't asked because he's probably, that's a big player and he's really important. And you got to think, even though I think Keon Keeley, I noticed he did some pretty good things late in that game against Wisconsin, and he got some opportunities earlier in the game. Jordan Renaud has been the second bandit. He's 265 pounds. I think he does some good things. He's still growing and developing himself, but I like the trajectory that he's on right now. But, being his size and everything and going into Athens, how they want to play as far as when you go in those odd fronts and you've got your bandit playing that 4-eye inside shoulder of the tackle, needing to hold up at the point of attack in the B gap and all those things like Jordan Renaud. I love his power profile as far as being more of an edge guy, but being more of an interior player. That's something that I still think he's growing and developing. So I hope LT is okay, because while there is some frustration with his inability to finish at times, Jimmy, I mean, he has been very, very disruptive since arriving in Tuscaloosa. And you saw some very disruptive moments, not just the sack on Saturday against Wisconsin.
He's consistently able to pressure the quarterback. He doesn't get him to the ground as often as we'd like, though he did get one Saturday. So let's not act like it doesn't happen. He got one on Saturday before the injury. But LT Overton is the best Alabama defender at consistently getting to the quarterback. Now, thankfully, they got several other guys who can get to the quarterback, even a James Smith. But the outside linebackers, Quay Russaw gets a sack. Yanze Pierre gets a sack. I think those guys are improving and contributing. But LT is the guy that consistently pressures the quarterback. You certainly need that against Georgia. Gunnar Stockton reminds me of Ty. I described Ty earlier as a fun combination of game manager and playmaker. Sort of how I would describe Gunnar Stockton right now. I mean, where this is a kid who manages the game, but don't think of him. He ain't Stetson Bennett. I mean, this is a real athlete that can make plays with his legs and burn you. And then he's got some arm talent. That throw he made to win the game, the throw to Humphreys at the end, that may have been the best single college football pass I saw the entire weekend. I mean, Gunnar Stockton's got some real ability, in addition to being a guy who's mature and can handle and manage an offense. You've got to pressure him. If you just let Gunnar Stockton control the game, they're going to score over 40 against Alabama, just like they did against Tennessee, and you're asking the offense and Ty to do too much. You've got to get pressure on Gunnar Stockton. It's a key, and the key to that is a healthy LT Overton. So you could say I'm waiting with bated breath for Kalen DeBoer's press conference on Monday to get an LT Overton update.
Yeah, and just one other thing that I want to bring up to fans. If I was you guys, I would expect a lot of 3-4 looks against Georgia, because one of the things, and I'll give Kane Womack a lot of credit, he has kind of broken out of that. I'm going to go 4-2-5 pretty much all the time. Do you have something that you wanted to add to that?
No, I was agreeing, and I was agreeing with that. I wish I'd have commented on it myself about how last year they were very, with their personnel, they didn't change much.
They didn't.
They've shown a willingness this year to go 4 DBs, 5 DBs, or even 6 DBs, almost Saban. It's almost as if, and I doubt this has really happened, but it's fun to guess. It's almost as if Nick Saban has talked him into it.
Yeah.
It's almost as like Saban has said, Kane, in this league, you got to be a little more specialized based on down and distance. And Kane's going to tell you this is just a natural progression of the kids learning the defense and adding more layers. That's what he's going to say. But it is kind of funny to me that every now and then you look up and you're like, is that Nick Saban's defense?
Yeah, and I mean, you get a guy like Jahad Campbell who can do a lot of different things for you, and you can get out of some different looks. And a lot of people don't even realize, like, based off personnel, it is different personnel. But, you are seeing those, 3 safety looks, the dime defense, and that's obviously it's going to be in those obvious passing situations, and not just, 3rd and 7s. We've talked about it. It's 3rd and long situations. Put the 3 safeties at the sticks, the first down marker, and then let them keep everything in front of them. Force a quick pass by the quarterback and then rally on the football, make sure that they have to punt. But, against 12 personnel, I've been noticing have seemingly, and granted, they did some last year too with Jahad Campbell playing, some of that outside linebacker, but, it's going to be a lot of 3-4. You're seeing Yanze Pierre get a much higher percentage of snaps than I probably thought that he was going to. Now, granted, when Jamarian Latham, who was another piece who has been missing, when he returns, maybe you don't see as much Yanze Pierre. We'll have to wait and see, but you are seeing Yanze Pierre, you're seeing Quay Russaw on the field at the same time. You're seeing the zero technique nose, you're seeing the 4 eyes or sometimes 5s on the outside shoulder of the tackles. So I like the variety that they're putting on the field, and I hope that continues, and I hope they can do some different things to try to confuse opposing offenses, and definitely do what you did last year to Carson Beck, to Gunnar Stockton, if you can. Present pictures pre-snap and then post-snap, give him something different and see how he handles it. Carson Beck did not handle it very well last year. Oh, at least not in the first half. Hopefully, you get a lot more of that first half performance from Alabama. And I mean, this is a chance. Like, everybody is now, people have the criticism for Florida State has kind of died down a little bit, but I mean, at this point, you should still be playing with that chip on your shoulder. So, Jimmy, do you have anything else that you want to add before we hop out of here?
Yeah, just real quickly, one position that I had some real doubts about at Alabama all summer, and I sort of hinted at it or sometimes maybe outright said it, which was probably that might be looking a little wrong. I want to give a shout out to Blake Dowd. He only punted twice, but it was for a 49-yard average. I think Blake Dowd has looked very good. I was concerned that this would be a weak spot for Alabama, that this would not be an asset. This might be a liability. It has not been. Alabama hasn't punted much the last 2 weeks, so we haven't seen a huge sample size. But Blake Dowd has been pretty good, so I want to give him a shout out for looking like an SEC punter out there. And Connor Talty, whose only miss was on a wet field at Florida State in the day that none of his teammates played particularly great either. But I think Connor Talty's been solid. So shout out to the kicker and the punter. Now they got to work on that kick coverage a little bit because they didn't even put a hand on Vinny Anthony on that kick return.
Yeah, that is a great shout out to the specialists because they have been as reliable as you could ask, especially Blake Dowd. He was a heck of a punter, at his previous stop. Small school, didn't get a lot of recognition, but he has translated that despite the fact there's a lot more pressure playing on this level. You love to see that, and he's actually, he's been a weapon. And with Alabama losing James Burnip, you didn't want him you didn't want that to become a problem area, and you're losing the field position battle based off a punter. So that is a very underrated element of this. Appreciate you bringing that up. Appreciate you joining me. This has been fantastic. We'll definitely talk again on Wednesday, and we'll, start to talk about some of the bye week stuff. And, then we'll start putting that focus towards Georgia.
Looking forward to it, man. I'm glad we get multiple shows leading up to Georgia. Gives it that Super Bowl feel. The game's bigger than I thought it would be in the preseason, simply in the sense Alabama has a loss. It's sort of a must win, whereas if both teams were unbeaten, my theme would be, hey, the loser of this game actually won the SEC last year and the winner didn't make the playoff. Why are y'all making such a big deal of this? Nope, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. Alabama doesn't need a second loss in September in terms of trying to reach its ultimate goals.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be dropping to 2-2 if you can avoid it. That's something that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. So that is yet again another excellent point. Appreciate all you guys for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys soon.
I may not suit up on Saturdays anymore, but I'm still in the game. In here, I call the plays, make adjustments, and lay it on the line. Want to feel that fire, that rush? Then you've got to get in the game. I used to say it in the tunnel, and I still say it now. Let's roll.